Welcome to episode 26 of Bare Naked Bravery. So it's still the beginning of the year, and every year we have this uproar in New Year's resolutions. Also, every year we have an official ditch day on January 17th. I just found that out this year. The statistics are kind of depressing because it's estimated that only 8% of New Year's resolutions are kept, which is why we have an official day to ditch your New Year's resolution. Which also brings us to why our lovely guest is joining us today. Today, my super rad friend Erin Pearson from Nashville is here to talk about why we don't do what we want to do. Erin Pearson is a fellow singer-songwriter, a fellow music teacher, and also a fellow writer. Not only that, but she is a visual artist and a jewelry artist. She is the definition of creative entrepreneur, and I am so proud to introduce you to her work, and this conversation. She and I have created a juicy little worksheet for this episode, which is available to download in the show notes. So be sure to check it out by going to barenakedbravery.com. And before we get started, I want to tell you that I have been sitting on this episode for months. I mean it, months, which is one of the reasons why we're opening the doors to something super cool this year, a book club. I have gathered a small group of creative entrepreneurs and podcast listeners to meet each month and talk about life as a creative business owner and to help each other solve problems throughout the year. Even though we're using a curated book of the month as an excuse to get together to chat, the conversation won't be limited to that book. So if you've got only time to attend the meeting and not read the book, that's a-okay with us. Also, each meeting will be recorded so you can watch it later if you can't attend it live. But here's the cool part. Conversations like this one with an author, the ones that I record a month ahead of time, those will be recorded live and available for book club members to attend and listen to right away. And we will have an exclusive members-only Q&A session with the author, which won't be released publicly. So if you enjoy this conversation and think you could have really used it a couple months ago, then there is more where this came from and you can get in on those conversations right away. So if you're wanting a little bump in your creative flow and a little more community behind your acts of bravery, then we would love to have you join us. If you're interested in joining us, then you can go to businessofbravery.com/book club. Membership is $15 a month, and if you use the coupon code BareNakedBravery, one word, then you can get your first 2 months of membership for $5 each month. Again, go to businessofbravery.com/book club to jump into the gang of kick-ass creatives like Erin and myself. With that, let us jump into the rest of today's episode featuring Erin Pearson. I know you are going to love it. You're listening to Bare Naked Bravery, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Erin Pearson. As a singer-songwriter, author, teaching artist, and creative entrepreneur, I encounter some really fascinating stories. I'm on a mission to reveal the depth and width of bravery and its benefits to creatives like yourself. More than ever today, our world needs bravery, unique bravery, from everyone. This is the place where you find it. There is no script or censorship today because that's how these facets of Bare Naked Bravery are in real life. So if you're listening with little ears nearby, please know that some episodes may contain mature language and subject matter. One of the easiest ways you can share bravery with the world is to send this episode to a friend or two. Send them an email, text, or tweet. Tag them in one of my Instagram posts. My handle is EmilyAnnPete. Or leave us a review on iTunes. It takes seconds and can be done from your phone right now. Again, we need more bravery in the world. So let's be brave together. Are you ready for some Bare Naked Bravery?
I'm ready for some Bare Naked Bravery.
Yay. Okay, so I thought we would talk today with Erin Pearson about things that you don't want to do.
Oh, yes.
So let's list real quick. Let's list something off of your to-do list right now that is something you don't want to do.
Oh, record
you have to do.
An audio book. I need to record my audiobook by next weekend. And I don't want to do it. And I can't really I have figured out why I don't want to do it, but it's not all that hard for me. I have all the equipment. I have it all. It's written. I mean, it's all ready to go. But every time I sit down to do it, I'm just like met with anticipation. I'm met with like those little like ghost feelings inside of you that are like, oh, actually, you should just really go to Starbucks right now and you should just get a big English breakfast tea and you should ponder the world and people watch, because that's really what you should be doing right now.
So I will say that this past week I took my car into the shop, and that was one of those things on my to-do list that was on my to-do list for, I kid you not, 12,000 miles. Like,
ooh.
I know, isn't that bad? It's so bad. But there's stuff on our lists that we put off and we put off and we put off and we put off. And Erin wrote this book called
10 Reasons Your Kids Don't Practice Their Music and What Parents Can Do About It.
Yes, and it's great. It's wonderful. It's on Amazon. And the link to it is in our show notes, so you can just sit tight and listen and then go buy it when we're done. But I thought we would talk today about some of your suggestions, Erin, for what we should do when we have those things on our to-do list that we just don't want to do.
Oh, it is such a real topic. And it's so interesting diving into this topic for me, because I just spent about 3 years of my life researching for this book that surrounds kids and quote unquote it started with getting them to do things that I want them to do that they don't want to do. And it really did kind of start there, because I was starting to notice that, I had about 25 students at the time, and like none of them were practicing. And I really wanted to be in denial about that. Like I wanted to believe that they were coming every week and, oh yay, music, and we're so excited and we're practicing. And I just started digging in there and realizing they're really not. And why aren't they? And I really have objectives and goals for them. And I always have their best interest in mind, but I want them to improve and progress and such. And so in looking like at what happens for children, it's also unlocked this sort of self-discovery process in myself as well, and noting myself as a child and that I was the worst of them all, pretty much. My poor teacher. I mean, honestly, if it wasn't for her, I would have probably quit music long before I luckily had a fantastic teacher. But that there are so many reasons inside of us why we just don't want to do things, and that it usually has nothing to do with you're lazy and you're just not an achiever, and you just suck. You are really always doing just what you shouldn't be doing, and man, if you would just do this and this and this and this, then your life would be together. And that tone, that stressful sort of feeling and tone that comes alongside.
Oh, the nag.
We don't want to do that nag. Like, here I am, a professional musician, right? And I just wrote a book on practicing frequency in kids, and I still struggle to get to my keyboard and work on my own things. And I love your example of the car servicing, because it's not just our creative projects, obviously. It's all of these things. And why is there resistance around these things? And, productivity books and I'm a big productivity nerd, right? So I went down that train a lot when in my early years, in my 20s and such, and they will uncover so much. But then we're still sort of left, believing we're either machines or that we're, these piles of mush, like curling under our covers and just succumbing to the emotions that we experience. So yeah, I think this is a fascinating topic.
I mean, as a music teacher myself, I have that same thing. Like, I can tell when one of my students is not practicing. Like, not only can I hear it in how they're playing, but I can also tell, like, when I say, so how was your week at the beginning of a lesson? What did you practice this week? And I can tell. I can totally tell. Anytime the answer starts with like, well, it doesn't matter what happens after the well. It's like, I totally know. Okay, you practiced once. Awesome. Great.
Yeah.
It's better than nothing, but it really, like, truly, you're not helping anyone by practicing once. Ugh. Anyways,
well,
your book is definitely necessary, and I'm really glad that it's written for parents, because I think the parents play a really big role, and your support system plays a really big role in dedicated.
it does. And kind of transitioning on from the kids, the second book is going to be all about adults. And so I'm in the current process of researching for that second book, which is looking at all of us. It's looking at all of our reasons why we don't practice. And yeah, I'm going to be talking about music, but really it could apply to anything. I mean, my research is based around systems thinking, systems theory, and looking at every component that goes into the system of why it is that we do what we do. And kind of taking on the positive edge of it, we like to go on the negative, like, why am I not doing this? And I kind of like to flip it around sometimes and look like, well, why are you doing something else? Why is it that you're motivated to, I don't know, go eat a cookie? Yay. Why is it that I want pizza? Why is it that I would like to go out and socialize with my friends? Or why is it that, for instance, right now for me, this is an interesting thing. I have no issue being motivated to just go. I just did an art show. I paint, and I just did a big art show, and I had no issue just like knocking out about 40 paintings. No issue whatsoever. I felt totally free to express myself. I felt a freedom to just put whatever I wanted on the page. I'm not an artist by training, but I've been an artist for a long time. But that's not my primary focus. That's not anything that I do sell, but it's a hobby sell, right? Like, so it's interesting to look that I would have no issue doing about 3 hours a day there, right? But then in an area that I feel such passion around, and I feel like it's so much of my voice to the world, here I would be met with these blocks of like, oh, this next album that I would like to write, what is it that I want to say? What if it's not received? What if the people around me think I suck and they just don't want to tell me, right? What if it's going to be another project that flops? What if, all of a sudden we bring in all of these blocks that we don't, in one mind thought, like we don't even necessarily associate all of these things all at once that we're experiencing. We just know that we would rather do something else.
Right. And that list is probably just as long as the list of things that I need to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So kind of looking at some of the top things that I see that affect children that I think really transfer over into both parenting, but then I've had a lot of parents that have read the book that have had some self-reflection time and take a look at how this was true for them as kids, but then also how it's maybe true for them now. And I like to always start with a discussion about what you value and taking a look that what you value most is going to win.
So we just had Dr. Friesen on, and he was in episode 4, and he is a neuropsychologist and was talking a lot about the valuing and how the values of your achievements really motivate the day-to-day dedication.
They do. And what's interesting to me as I've researched that as well has been that negative values also drive you. And that's a challenge because negative values can be very motivating. Like, let's say I have a value that I always want to be seen as the very, very, very best, right? And it has a negative spin on it. Not to say that excellence isn't a positive value. Excellence is a positive value. But, looking at negative values too and seeing how they can also be driving behavior, but it's not necessarily sending you to a place that you want to go long term. And that can be a challenge too for looking at, why it is, like starting with what you value the very most and also looking at competing values of like, let's say I value excellence, but I also value everybody thinking that I have everything all together all the time and blah, 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 right? All of a sudden those things are going to compete because you're trying to show off at the same time you're trying to be excellent, but then maybe you also have a value that you really want to craft. So then your time frame's all off, and this creates this sort of misalignment of things that you value. And then we also have beliefs that begin to interact into the picture of, that can be formed in social modeling of when you grew up, different beliefs that you started to carry on about yourself, different things that teachers have told you. And so then all those things start to play together and mesh together. And it can also create sort of a challenge of goal setting and focus, right? So all of a sudden we've set goals because we kind of went off on one trail over here, but maybe our truest values are taking a walk in nature, spending time with friends and family. Maybe we actually value some of those things a little bit more, but we're not giving them enough space in our life because we think we should be something else. We think we should value something else, or maybe a convention like a church or a synagogue or someone's teaching in some way or another has made us to feel like we should value this, and this, because those are the right values, rather than taking a look at what our time suggests that we really value. Our time is going to let us know what we value, and how we want to spend our time lets us know what we value. And when we want to look at goal setting with kids or with ourselves, we really do need to look at how we are authentically wired. And I think this is where we get into bravery, because fearlessly saying no to overcommitment is something that I have struggled with.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, I'm also thinking like it takes some really big lady balls to admit that I actually don't want to take my car into the shop.
Big lady balls. Yep.
Not out of just not wanting to care for my car, but just out of, I know that it's going to be expensive. I know that they're probably going to look at me funny because I waited too long, and it just gets longer, and you wait longer and longer and longer because the other competing, I guess, anti-motivators,
right,
are there. Absolutely. But you don't want to, but it takes some guts to be able to admit that those anti-motivators exist.
Well, and then I like to take a look, for instance, in that example, I feel like a lot of people relate to that example of taking your car in, right? Some of the other parts of that are like, it's going to be expensive. Well, then what train of thought does that lead us to?
Oh my gosh.
It's going to be expensive. Well, I was hoping to spend that $2,000 I know it's going to cost to repair the car on my new project. And if I go in, they're going to tell me that I have to, and I know that there's a problem there, and I don't want to have to face that. And then I have to go down the train of thought of, oh, why don't I make more money? Oh, well, if I would really just do this and this and this and this, okay, then I'd start to make more money. And then I could fix my car, and then I could have the car. But why am I not good enough for that? Oh my gosh, I just suck. And then all of a sudden, like, taking our car to get whatever repair is needing done becomes a microcosm of life reflection. And
it's a full existential crisis.
We have an existential crisis on our hands. And this is something that, none of us wants to be dealing with on a random Wednesday morning, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, so when we have these negative motivators
mm-hmm.
pulling us into these little like thought spirals,
mm-hmm.
what would you suggest we do?
Yeah, I think that's
your research.
Question. Well, I think we kind of need to take a time out, one, and we need to have a moment to look at what we're doing. I actually just did this with a friend yesterday. I was spinning. I've got all of these projects I'm trying to manage, and I'm having all of these things, and I was overwhelmed. And in spite of knowing what to tell other people about this stuff, I have to be brave, and I have to say that this is a struggle for me, which is probably why I know a lot about it, right? It's like I struggle here. And I had a girlfriend sit down while we sort of looked at my list of competing priorities, right? Trying to align my values and my goals, my real goals, to the competing priorities of my life. And we just started looking down the list, and it became pretty clear pretty quickly that a lot of the stuff on here is not necessary. It's stuff that I was spinning about because someone said I should, because someone said this, because someone said that, because this group of people and that entrepreneur said this. And really and truly, if I look at my own values, what I care about, if I look at what my real goals are, not the ones that everybody else put on me, but the ones that are inside my heart of like, I would like to write a new album this year, right? Well, that is it truly from my heart. And I want it to be something that I'm really proud of. But my competing thing is I live here in Nashville where there are publishers everywhere. There are writers' nights everywhere. There are people all around that are constantly wanting to pitch music for TV and for film. And I constantly feel this pressure that I need to write 2 songs a day, that I need to have them be perfect for this market and perfect for that market. And I need to be co-writing with every single person that I've ever seen or met. And pretty soon I'm off of this trail. I'm off on that new trail of meeting everyone else's expectations for me, which are I should look like I've got a heck of a lot of stuff going on. And it should all look really good. And I should be keeping it all together, right? And I think that we have to start with that big, long list. We have to start with your truest values, and we got to look at your time, and we got to say, okay, what I really want is to write an album, a good album I believe in. I don't really have a ton of time. I do have enough time, but my greater priority truly in my heart is that I want to write that album. And that means I have to say no to all of those other things. And I just have to create space, and I have to fearlessly say, it doesn't make me a loser somehow. It doesn't make me not progressing in my career if I'm taking time out from the co-writes and from the publishers and from the writers' rounds and from all of the performing. That doesn't make me somehow regressing. That doesn't make me a loser. That doesn't make me any which way. That is authentic to me. That is exactly what I'd like to be doing. And when I'm ready, I'll share.
Right. Yeah. And that makes the writing the album feel so much better. Because automatically you feel like you have the space and the time, and that writing the album is the thing you want to do. And writing the album isn't taking you away, quote unquote, taking you away from the things you, quote unquote, should be doing. Mm-hmm. It is the thing.
It's the thing I should be doing. I have removed all of the pressure, right? And, we can get into another kind of pressure with an album, one that I do experience, and this kind of gets later into the book, which does become into the anxiety, the performance anxiety, the social anxiety, the fear of how one's work will be received. This is a whole nother set of issues that I also experience. I tend to experience it. Some people, that prevents them from starting altogether. So layered in this mix of shoulds, the should vultures, right? We also have the layering
a should sandwich.
We have should sandwiches all over us, right? And then we have actual, real, probably learned anxieties, real learned habits. We're adults, right? We all come with these habits and these sets of beliefs that we've taken on over time, and then actual habits that have been trained into our little neural pathways, right? Things that we do habitually day in and day out. And some of those patterns are going to need to be changed, for us to get in there and do what we need to do. But then some of them are deep. And that's where if we get into, anxieties and neurological disorders and adults with ADD and all of these types of things and performance anxieties, they come from very real places. And then we're confronted with emotional work that we have to do surrounding our project or our to-do list of the thing that we don't want to do. Just like we talked about with the garage, right? We've gone into an emotional therapy session around getting our car repaired. And imagine how much, if it feels that significant around getting our car repaired, how much more significant will it feel about the creative project that we've always wanted to do in our lives? We get into, some of my adult students face issues of their parents shamed them when they were little. Like if you're not going to be good at this, then, you shouldn't take music. I don't want to pay for lessons for you anymore because you're not worth it.
Yeah. It's a waste of time.
Right. I mean, talk about it's a waste of your time. You should be doing something else because you're not that good. And I come from the belief that, music is intended for all of us. Music is intended, it's inside of all of us. Every single person has some artistic or musical, it's a way of expression. One of the most interesting experiences of my life is I studied abroad in Cuba.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, when Cuba was closed back in, I'm going to date myself now. Yes. Back in 2003, 2004,
Wow.
I took this is random. I was a soccer player and I quit soccer my junior year of college. And this was a hugely emotional thing for me. I won't get into it, but talk about, it's the bravery side of like knowing you're doing the wrong thing. I was a soccer player and a music major and I just struggled. I just couldn't do it both, everything. And it just, my days then were awful. And so
That sounds insane. Like all you have to say is soccer, like sports and music degree. Like I know how much time the music degree costs you in a day, but I can only imagine traveling around doing soccer games too.
It was like I would travel in the fall. I would travel like 5 days out of the week, and then we would have concerts. And then I was always the exception to everybody's rule, and I hated it. I hated being the exception to the rule. I hated always being tired. I was always sick. I couldn't perform, and then I get yelled at and by everybody, and it was just sort of this thing, this extremes of, I was up at 5 a.m. for weights, and then I'd be up until midnight for opera rehearsal, and everything in between it would be completely jam-packed. And I did feel this stretching of self of like, so when I come into this discussion of scheduling and goal setting and whatever, this is coming from an extreme person who I've been there and I've done the productivity thing and I've pushed myself absolutely to the limit, and I've made myself really sick over it.
Like those of us, because I'm also a productivity nerd too, those of us that are productivity nerds are usually that because we needed it.
Yes.
Like, it's the only thing that gets us through the day is that one little Pomodoro trick or that one little like set the timer for 5 minutes,
Yes. And we have to take, again, in this discussion of looking at anxieties and looking at our like therapy issues that we need to maybe our emotional issues to uncover, we also have to consider why is it that we're doing all of that, right? And so this interesting thing of I quit soccer right before my junior year, like at the very end of my sophomore year. And it allowed me this opportunity, this very strange opportunity to go, and last minute, I signed up for the trip a week beforehand, I think maybe 2. And I went with my Music of the Caribbean class. It's like an elective. Right? Only I would take Music of the Caribbean, of course. And I was like, ooh, calypso, son and salsa, whatever. And I signed up with my class of like 9 people to go on this Santiago de Cuba, studying at the conservatory there. And it was maybe like it was a summer abroad, but it was like maybe like a month and a half, maybe shorter, maybe like a month kind of thing. But still, it was just life changing. And we went right during the middle of Carnival, and everybody is like conga in the street. People are sipping the ron, and everybody is just alive. And there's folklorico dancing, and there's salsa everywhere. Well, it's not salsa there; it's son, but it's rumba and son and folklorico and all of these massive colors everywhere. And the most fascinating thing that I learned there was that you'd walk down the street and you'd pass a little tienda or a bookshop, and people everywhere, every man, woman, and child would be playing music and playing it better or at the same kind of comparable level to my college peers who were studying as music majors. Every man, woman, and child, every single neighborhood having a band program, and they have competing rivalries and all these types of things. It was a giant dose of humble pie, because it's like these people are not doing music because they were adulated as a child, or because they have dreams of being famous, or this, that, or the other. They simply enjoy it.
Yeah, it's part of the whole culture.
It is part of the whole culture. If we don't have some song and some live dancing, we don't have a party, right? We aren't enjoying ourselves, and we're not, displaying this like vivaciousness of life. And so I try to take that with me into my teaching, and I've been trying to apply it into my creative life. But those roots go deep. Those roots of social anxiety a little bit, those roots of wanting my art to be accepted, and for other people wanting their creative work to be accepted by their families, or not even not even accepted, just not made fun of. Like I was thinking of a girlfriend who, she wanted to do something like learn another language, and she didn't, because she's like, oh, well, if I tell like my boyfriend that I'm going to this, weird thing, then they're not gonna, they just don't want to be made fun of. It's learning a language, and that's cool. So,
if you're attached to people who have a stigma about whatever it is that's on your to-do list, practicing, going to the class, whatever.
Right.
And those people aren't supporting you, or your immediate culture is not encouraging you to continue to thrive in that area, then it's really hard to find it within yourself to do that.
Yep.
So tough.
It's that expectations balance too. It's like my personal expectations I'm bringing into the picture now. So we have our values, and then we have our goals, and our beliefs are in there somewhere. And then we have our time, our schedules, right? How those are aligned. And then we go into expectations, and we look at, what is my expectations for language study? Oh, I want to be a fluent speaker. I'm going to be a translator. We take these things so far. Maybe you just enjoy the process of communicating in another language. Maybe that's all it ever had to be. Maybe the process of playing piano after work makes you feel like you've completed your day. Maybe that's all it really ever had to be. And maybe you're worth it. Maybe you're worth having these things you just genuinely enjoy, and it doesn't have to be for capitalistic gain. So we have those expectations, and we have the expectations of others on us, right? What is the expectation? So obviously relationship dynamics are very huge here for adults, because if you have a partner, what is your partner's expectation on you?
Well, and expectations lend themselves to, especially as an adult, expectations point towards sustaining a norm.
Yes, very good.
And that when you decide to all of a sudden pick up French out of the blue, your boyfriend starts to wonder, like, wait, what's happening? Why is it? Why was it not good enough before?
Right. Why was it not good enough before? Yes, love that. Totally.
Or sustaining the norm within a childhood parent relationship, within practicing those expectations of being a good student.
Yes.
And which again, like, they do tie to beliefs and values and goals, but the expectations are almost like the surface level symptoms of those values and goals.
Well, they are. So, like, I think that's exactly it. I think that I've learned to see the behavior as the bubbling up results of the underlying system, right? Mm-hmm. So the behavior that comes out, whether it's, a kid yelling and screaming, right? Or it's a practicing behavior, or whether it's a non-behavior, right? We're not doing something, right? We're looking at this big ball underneath, and we're looking at how it all interacts with each other. And I think ultimately we just have to look at what's really working and what isn't really working. And that is difficult, because, all of a sudden, if you look at your relationship with your boyfriend and you're like, this isn't supporting me as a human, this isn't supporting me. And maybe learning French is not a long-term goal, but maybe just the act of wanting to go forward and do something interesting and different is a part of your personality. And that brought out the conflict in this other area in sort of a new way. And I think some of those things really get in there too, of If I went out and I took up painting street fair sidewalk art, right? How is my world impacted by that? And maybe I really care about that. And maybe the people around are going to maybe shift and change, or maybe my friend group thinks I'm a weirdo now because I like to be a part of the Imananari Street Art Festival. So I think these things are very foundational.
Yeah. Today's episode is sponsored by the Business of Bravery's book club. And before we get back to the conversation, I want you to hear maybe 6 reasons why you might need this book club. First reason, you have had the same New Year's resolution to read more every year for the last 5 years. Reason number 2, being a creative entrepreneur is sometimes a little bit lonely. Reason number 3, you're curious how other creatives run their businesses and you kind of want to pick all their brilliant genius minds. Reason number 4, you love authors, you love their books about how stuff is done, and you want to just get as much of it as you can. Reason number 5, you love the Bare Naked Bravery podcast and you want as much of it as you can get as fast as you can get it. Reason number 6, you have had a few too many business or life emergencies last year and you wish you would have had a trusted group of fellow experts to help brainstorm. So introducing the really rad, self-propelled, creative group of entrepreneurs who love what we do and love doing it in really unique ways. Your monthly membership includes a curated book of the month, a monthly book club meeting where we talk about the book of the month, but it's not required that you read the book of the month to attend the meeting, so rest easy. It's also not required that you attend every meeting live because all the calls will be available afterwards for future reference. You are also a member of our private Facebook support group, and you get access, here's the cool part, to live Q&As with our authors. So anytime I interview an author for the podcast, you'll get to attend the interview live or watch the recording soon after. And you can also submit questions for the episode and even participate in the exclusive Q&A following the initial interview. You also get a welcome call with me because I want to make sure that everyone who joins the book club is in the right place. So if we decide that it's not the right book club for you or not the right membership thing for you, then I'll totally give you a refund. But we get to talk one-on-one because I want to pick your brain. I want to get to know you. Membership is $15 a month, and if you use the coupon code, one word, Bare Naked Bravery, you get your first 2 months for $5 each month. You can join us by visiting businessofbravery.com/book club. Again, that's businessofbravery.com/book club. We would love to have you join us. That is all. Let's get back to the conversation. So we've got values, goals, beliefs, time, expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else on the list?
Yeah. I think now we kind of get into just systems, not just emotional systems and family systems, but like your setup. I like to talk about practicing with my students in terms of my adult students anyway, in terms of rituals, right? Creating a ritual around what it is that you hope to accomplish and what you hope to do, because everybody needs a little bit of time to adjust into something. Specifically now, we're not talking about our oil change at the car shop, right? You could make a ritual around that. I go and get at the cafe, and I take my book, and I wait for the car repair.
Dropping my car off and getting a pedicure in the meantime sounds awesome to me.
You could totally do that, right? So the point of that being, think about how much emotion is brought into any type of creative work, whether it be writing a book or it's, making a piece of jewelry, or, there's emotion that is here. So maybe your favorite thing to do, for me, I've actually set up my whole house to be like this sort of wild creative space where like different rooms kind of have different meanings for me. And in my living room, I've set it up so my painting and I make guitar string jewelry, but they're social. They are social things for me. So I like to have friends over and put on a movie, and I'm just sort of like painting, and we're gabbing, and we're sort of watching movies. And that's sort of a ritual for me that I really enjoy around these creative projects. And I'm really productive in those times, but my main focus is enjoyment. I'm just having a blast, right? I'm just having a good time. So sometimes for adults, the systems can be a little problem, the actual function, because maybe you're in an apartment and you have shared walls and you have roommates and you're like, okay, well, if I play the piano at 11:30 at night when I have a spare moment, I'm going to wake everybody up and they're not going to like it. And then they have a difficulty around an actual physical part of, the system chain or maybe it's something simple. I use this example for kids a lot because this is a kid thing, but maybe it's as simple as you don't have a sharpened pencil, and if you don't have the sharpened pencil, then you can't write the notes in that you need to write to remember where the fingers are going to go. And then you get frustrated and you can't find your pencil and you just stop and you go do something else, right? So
for my students, this is hilarious, but it also is like so true. And I speak from complete and utter experience. When an instrument is in its case,
yes,
that is the biggest reason for me to not practice it.
Totally.
Because I have to do work to practice it.
Right.
But if the guitar is in the guitar stand and I walk by it to go into the other room, I'm more likely to just like pick it up and just play something real quick and then put it back down and go on.
Right. Which also then kind of, again, taps into the values, because the guitar people or the cello, they're going to say, keep it in the case because you don't want to ruin the instrument. You don't want to you get into these conflicting, like, oh, well, they said if I kept it on the thing, then it's going to ruin the instrument. And I'm all for like, okay, do what you do, right? So if I'm the same way as you though, like if I have the room I'm sitting right now is kind of one of my writing rooms where I really like to write music in. It's kind of more minimal, but it has a keyboard in it, and the speakers for the keyboard are attached to the keyboard itself. So I don't have to actually turn the speakers on, because I find that to be a barrier sometimes.
Isn't that amazing?
Amazing. It's amazing. And then
part of this is like first world problems completely. However, they're just real. It's real stuff.
Right, but you're right. And so if I take out my guitar out of the case and I have it on a stand in this room, right, I look at it and I'm like, oh, I want to play the guitar. Oh, I want to write a song. And I feel invited into the space, and the music calls to me, and a piano that's just sitting out wants to be played. So this sort of environmental, like what is in ritual. So environment and ritual are kind of different, right? But at the same time, they do interact with one another. When is your time, right? If you want to sit and learn something new, is it that you get your cup of coffee in the morning and you're sort of snuggly and it's a Saturday morning and this is your Saturday morning, like I go and sit and play my cello, or is this your unwind after work? Like many people will go for a run after work, or they'll go to the gym. They have a kind of a ritual around a time of day, maybe that they do something. And rituals can also be inhibiting depending on, what it is and if it's aligned up to you. But I really urge people to look at sort of that your daily habit life, because, if it could be that just a small alteration is needed, like maybe something isn't serving you that's part of your daily routine, right? Where if just a tiny baby shift, really small, could just, send you into a different.
Well, I'm a really big advocate for not only just within the practice space or focusing on one thing at a time, but also when you are messing with these kinds of systems. And this applies to marketing and self-promotion and running your business and even relationships. Like, you can't expect to do a really great big thing or a really great big feat of strength without just adjusting the whole system in tiny increments.
Yes. Well, and I think when we look at it as a system, this is why it is so important to start with what you really value and what you really want, right? Your real mission. Like, what are you trying to accomplish in your life overall? And how does this stuff all fit in? Because if you start there, the trickle down, is aligned with who you really are, right? But then we get into flow and process, and we tweak one thing here and we tweak one thing there and we tweak, and the entire system you experience will experience ripples throughout your entire life. You'll experience the ripples. And so we want to look at the very root thing that's going to cause the deepest, most authentic change, right? And then we want to gently, like over time, we should feel that first thing, right? Let yourself experience it. And then, like you're saying, these tiny little tweaks here and there to things like environment, to things like these things, they're going to be felt, but we do have to give them time to be felt. And we do have to acknowledge that we will see that trickle down sort of across the board.
Well, you're doing just a string of experiments, basically.
Mm-hmm. You are.
You run, this is like third grade stuff. If you run 3 experiments at the same time, you can't get accurate data back from the experiment.
Right. You don't know. So you got to be
the one experiment. See what happens to the plants when you play music around them or when you yell at them.
Did you see that shouting water one where you shout at the water, or in like over time the ice turns black? Did you see that?
No, but I have seen the one where you microwave the water and then let it get to room temperature before you give it to the plant. And then you have like normal unmicrowaved water, and the water that was microwaved basically kills the plant.
Oh no.
I know.
I think it was one of my friends posted something, and her title to this post about, it was like shouting at ice or something, like shouting at ice when it was formed. And I think it was like Cameron Diaz or somebody, maybe it wasn't her, maybe it was the other one that looks like her, Gwyneth Paltrow. I think one of those two like had posted something about how if you shout at ice while it's forming, it will turn black. It was like a research study, and her quote was, "This is why all of us should eat carbs." But at the same time, I'm like, don't shout at the ice.
Well, okay, so let's go back to rituals and setup and systems.
Yeah.
And we have, other than the ritual of watering your plant with unmicrowaved water, I'm such a fan of rituals, but I've noticed like one of the rituals that I really love, which is writing every day in the morning.
Yeah.
Sometimes that doesn't help me out, because like one of the things I am wanting to do more and more these days is just more walking. However, if I start my day by sitting down writing, guess what's right in front of me, or what's really near, is my laptop and my computer and like work. So if I've noticed that recently, that like my system, my setup, my ritual is promoting me to work more.
Yeah. And I'd actually speak to that. That's a brain function issue thing. I look to neuroscience for that stuff. And one of the reasons I do is because we're actually talking in terms of like what types of brain waves are stimulating what types of thoughts, right? And so you can always reset yourself. And I think a lot of people don't realize that you have that within your power, that napping isn't always bad, for instance, because when you nap and you wake up, all of a sudden your brain waves are functioning at a certain level that is really good for you to, for instance, read a book and retain the information, to learn new language, to open up thought process and creativity of connecting one idea to another idea that all of a sudden you're like, oh, I've got it. I've got the solution to the problem at work. And you got that solution because you were coming out of a nap, and all of a sudden your brain state was more relaxed. So you were able to make the connections. A lot of people say that about, oh, I get my best ideas in the shower. Well, think about your brain function in the shower.
Right.
Right? Or I get my best ideas while I'm running. Well, we've all of a sudden, our beta response is different than when we're sitting here doing admin. And so I always urge, when you look at sort of the tweaks in the scheduling, is look at what types of activities lead into one another and what types of activities don't, and then look at how you can reset yourself. If you are trying to, for instance, do a bunch of admin, that is a like type of task. So group all those like tasks together and know you've probably got about 90 minutes before you're going to need to switch into a different sort of brain function. There's a really great author I love who has a fantastic book. Her name is Shelley Carson.
Okay. She
has a book called Your Creative Brain, and I love it. She's a researcher out of Harvard, and she brain mapped like 100 creatives. She did brain scans on them while they were creating.
I'm writing this down because I want to read it now.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It has like quizzes and things too, just, little kind of quirky things. But one of the things I love about the various neuroscientists that I follow is that sort of this notion of left brain, right brain is a little outdated. Not to say that certain things aren't housed certain places. It's more of that our brain functions in kind of sets, right? Certain sets fire, and it's kind of learning to switch from like the executive part of your brain to the part that does like language learning. We can learn to shift between these different brain sets, as this particular author calls them. And I like to look at more shifting in brain function and starting to understand how it is that you can do your walking in the morning and have that inspiration, and then understand how it is that you could bridge from your walking to whatever else next you'd want. Sometimes it's just a matter of shifting switching them. So like with kids, if they go from their math homework straight into music practicing, that's like really solidly note based, like they're digging it out and they're using an analytical kind of function. They're using like a problem solving, they're using the same function. It's too much all at once. But if they just go out and play basketball for 10 minutes and then they come back in, they're like, oh, okay, I'm good.
Right. I think that's an important thing to remember, that you can reset yourself. You have a lot of power in that, and really good reminder for me.
Even a 10-minute meditation.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't, I think people think it needs to be like a really long thing. It doesn't. It can also be like
washing the dishes.
You can take a shower.
That might be on the list itself.
Yeah. And I think the other thing to remember is also food intake. Like, what are you fueling your body with and at what time? Because if you're already like knocking out admin work and you suck down a cup of coffee on top of that, right? We are putting our brain into boom, boom, I'm getting it done mode, right? And that's, a cup of coffee is great, for when we want to stimulate that type of activity. But if we're trying to sink and relax into a more of a creative state, and then all of a sudden we dose it with some caffeine, that's going to be a problem, which is when we get into the issue of drug use and stuff in general. This is one of the reasons why people do turn to mind-altering substances. But I think it's also important to be aware that those substances are not necessary. You can meditate and get into that similar brain state. You can do other things that are probably more healthy for your body and be able to reach that same level of creativity. You don't have to be a tortured artist to be able to be creative. It's just what it is, kind of.
Well, it's definitely a cultural stigma that the creativity and the lives that we want to lead have to be, the road to them is difficult. Oh my gosh, my brain. Now my brain is like talking about brain stuff and I can't handle it.
Yeah.
So I would like to draw up a fancy little download for everyone with the lists of things that we've talked about today: values, goals, belief, time, expectations, systems, which includes setups and rituals. Is there anything else on the list we should include in this juicy little download?
I think we should make sure to add in there just issues, like when something else is up, like when it is like an ADD, when it's a performance anxiety, when it's a therapy type issues. I think it's important to look at those. I think also
asking for help is for sure.
Asking for help, knowing when, you have an anxiety problem is a huge thing for a lot of adults, having an anxiety problem. And I think the last thing that we didn't discuss, which is important, is you need to be inspired. Who do you like? Find your interests, right? Just continue to explore. And it doesn't have to just be like, if you're an artist, you don't only have to look at paintings to be inspired. You could be inspired by that walk in nature. You could be inspired by going to see live music. You could be inspired by many things. And so I think it's looking creatively also about that all of your life will inspire your want to do things. And if you're too, humdrum in one spot, that's probably going to be an issue for you.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the inspiration is an important, really, really important to all of this. Like when you're learning an instrument, to be constantly listening to other awesome instrumentalists. Above my piano in the other room, I've got the album covers of some of my favorite LPs as just kind of this like wall of saints. I call it the wall of saints with all of the people that I want to be inspired by. And it's really great to have that line or the panel of people looking down on your piano or on whatever you're doing as like, you got this, go for it.
Right.
And it's kind of hokey, but I love it. And I love that kind of stuff. So,
well, and strangely, many people don't, even though they have creativity in them, or even professional artists and such, what can happen is that people are resistant to listening to music. They're resistant to viewing paintings. They're resistant to being inspired by the work of others. And I generally look to that as an issue of emotion. When you get into those sources of inspiration, you get into emotions like jealousy, you get into emotions of like, why am I not creating more? You get, so I think it's interesting because this whole thing, it also starts to bring up censorship and ways you felt censored as a child, or ways that you continue to censor yourself, or the type of things maybe you thought that you were like, bluegrass artist, but you really love classical music, and you start to get into how you were raised, and you start to get into all of these things. But it's really important to go and really find those sounds and those things that you identify with, not that you always said you did, or that you think others think that you should be into, but what are you actually drawn to? And I think that helps too.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, it was
so great. This has been so great. Okay, so beyond the Bare Naked Bravery coloring book, which is available to you every week, your brave takeaway from today's show is a super rad little journaling worksheet based on our conversation today. You'll be able to whip it out anytime you're faced with a beastly or not so beastly task that you want to do but can't figure out why it just isn't happening. To download that right away, go to barenakedbravery.com to find the show notes from today's episode by typing Erin Pearson into the search bar. Erin and I would love to hear all about your favorite parts of today's Bare Naked Bravery. You can find Erin Pearson and myself on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and more. Go ahead and tag us so we can cheer you on and see what you're up to. And with that, that's our show for the week. Thank you for listening. I treasure the fact that you chose this podcast to listen to this week. There's a lot of stuff you can listen to, and I do not take it lightly that you chose us. Give us a review and rate the show in your iTunes desktop app or on your podcast app on your phone if you liked the episode. Seriously, it helps us out a lot more than it is a hassle for you. And all of this bravery deserves to be spread far and wide as possible, and you are a part of that. If you're digging the music in today's episode, that is because it's brought to you by my friends at Music Box Licensing, a premier music creative agency. Wait, I said that backwards. A premier creative music agency dedicated to finding and crafting unique soundtracks. To find out more about all the artists, musicians, and other sponsors of the show, including the book club, please visit barenakedbravery.com/sponsors. to go check that out. I am so looking forward to being with you next week because we have some great things in store for you. Until then, I have one message for you. It's this: be yourself, be vulnerable, be brave, because the world needs more of your bare naked bravery.